Let me start with something that will upset a lot of people, because uncomfortable truths always do. Most people spend their entire lives trying to look smart. They collect opinions, repeat headlines, chase trends, and memorize whatever sounds impressive in conversation. And meanwhile, they quietly sabotage their own financial future through completely avoidable mistakes. Getting rich has almost nothing to do with brilliance. It has everything to do with avoiding stupidity. I've watched this pattern repeat for decades. Same behaviors, same outcomes, different faces. People don't fail because they lack intelligence. They fail because they refuse to develop judgment. They confuse activity with progress. They confuse consumption with success. They confuse confidence with competence. Here's what strikes me as almost absurd. The average person spends years in school. They learn algebra, history, literature. They take exams. They earn certificates. Then they graduate and walk into the real world without understanding the basic mechanics of money. They can quote Shakespeare, but they can't read a balance sheet. They can solve equations, but they don't understand cash flow. They've been trained to pass tests, not to build wealth. I'm not against education. Education matters. But there's a difference between learning and being conditioned. What passes for financial education in most places is closer to marketing than teaching. The so-called experts don't want you to understand money. They want you dependent on them. They need wealth to seem complicated, mysterious, inaccessible. Because if people realized how simple the core principles really are, there would be no market for magic formulas. The truth is boring. Wealth is built through a handful of basic ideas applied consistently over a long period of time. They aren't exciting. They don't sell seminars. They don't make flashy social media clips. But they work. Start with the most obvious rule that nearly everyone ignores. Spend less than you earn. That's it. That's the foundation. Everything else is secondary. People hear this and nod, but they don't live it. They get paid and immediately think about what they can buy instead of what they can keep. Income rises, spending rises faster. A person making $50,000 feels broke. A person making $500,000 feels stretched. Why? Because lifestyle expands to consume whatever comes in. The real determinant of wealth isn't income. It's the gap between income and expenses. That gap is your seed corn, and most people eat it. They consume their future. Worse, they borrow against it. They take on debt to finance things that decay in value. They use money they don't have to impress people they don't even like. It would be funny if it weren't so destructive. Here's what actually matters. That surplus, that leftover money, that gap, that's what you invest. Not speculate with. Invest. You convert earned income into assets that generate more income. And here's where people get confused. They call almost anything an asset. Most of it isn't. Ownership alone doesn't make something an asset. Cash flow does. A real asset puts money in your pocket. A business that produces profit. Investments that distribute income. Properties that generate positive returns after expenses. These work while you sleep. These grow while you're busy living your life. Most people confuse consumption with investment. They buy expensive houses, luxury cars, gadgets, upgrades, and call it building wealth. But if something requires constant money from you just to exist, it isn't helping you. It's draining you. Let me give you a simple example. Two people each have $20,000. One buys a new car. It feels great, smells new, looks impressive, immediately starts depreciating. The other invests in income-producing assets yielding 4%. The first person gets transportation and a monthly payment. The second person gets $800 a year in passive income. Fast forward 10 years. The car buyer is shopping again. The investor has collected thousands in income and likely seen the original capital grow. One looks richer in public. The other becomes richer in reality. This is the difference between appearing wealthy and being wealthy. Most people spend their lives focused on appearances. The few who succeed focus on ownership. Now let's talk about money itself, because misunderstanding money leads to catastrophic decisions. Money is not wealth. Money is a claim on wealth. It's a medium of exchange, a measuring stick, a tool. And like any tool, its value depends on how it's managed. Modern money is increasingly disconnected from reality. It can be created without limit. Every new unit reduces the value of existing units. That's not speculation. That's arithmetic. When currency expands faster than productivity, purchasing power declines. That means cash quietly loses value over time. People save diligently, feel responsible, and slowly get poorer without realizing it. Trying to build wealth by holding cash alone is like trying to store ice in the sun. You don't save wealth in paper promises. You save wealth in productive assets. That means businesses, that means ownership, that means things that retain value and generate returns, regardless of what policymakers decide. This doesn't require extreme behavior. It requires rational behavior. You stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like an investor. Consumers ask, what can I buy today? Investors ask, what will this be worth in 10 years? That single question changes everything. Then there's debt. People love to oversimplify it. They scream that all debt is bad. That's nonsense. Debt is a tool, like fire. It can cook your food or burn down your house. Bad debt finances consumption. It buys things that shrink in value. Good debt acquires assets that produce more income than the debt costs. Same mechanism. Completely different outcomes. Most people use debt to accelerate stupidity. The wealthy use it cautiously to accelerate compounding. Then there's taxes. People treat taxes like whether unavoidable and mysterious. They aren't. The system is designed with incentives. Employees pay first and spend what's left. Investors earn, optimize, and defer. That timing difference alone can change an entire lifetime outcome. This isn't unfairness. It's instruction. The system rewards ownership, risk-taking, and long-term investment. Most people never learn this, so they stay trapped trading hours for wages. A job gives income. Ownership creates wealth. They are not the same thing. And here's where psychology enters the picture. Because none of this works if your emotions control your behavior. Fear keeps people stuck. Envy drives reckless spending. Pride prevents learning. Greed leads to chasing bubbles. Financial success is less about IQ and more about temperament. Patience beats brilliance. Discipline beats cleverness. Consistency beats intensity. The boring virtues win. Delayed gratification is the entry fee. You sacrifice now for freedom later. You drive modest cars. You live below your means. You invest instead of spending. You say no when everyone else says yes. Nobody applauds this. Nobody throws parties for compound interest. But 10 or 20 years later, when your assets generate more income than your labor ever could, when you have options instead of obligations, then it becomes obvious who made the better choices. Wealth is built quietly. Poverty is loud. Most people choose loud. That's where I'll stop for now. Let me take this further, because people underestimate how much behavior matters more than strategy. Most financial failures don't come from lack of information. They come from lack of control. People know they should save. They know they should invest. They know they shouldn't live beyond their means. Yet they do it anyway. Why? Because impulse is stronger than intention. The modern world is engineered to extract your money. Every screen, every billboard, every notification is designed to trigger desire. Buy this. Upgrade that. You earned it. Treat yourself. They frame consumption as self-care and restraint as deprivation. That's backwards. Discipline is freedom. Consumption is the cage. You don't build wealth by maximizing pleasure. You build wealth by maximizing margin. Margin between what you earn and what you spend. Margin between emotion and action. Margin between short-term comfort and long-term independence. People underestimate how powerful that margin becomes over time. I've watched ordinary people with modest incomes quietly become wealthy simply because they respected this gap. They didn't chase excitement. They didn't try to impress. They automated their investing, lived simply, and stayed consistent for decades. No brilliance, no shortcuts, just discipline applied repeatedly. And I've watched high earners destroy themselves financially because they never learned restraint. Expensive homes, leased cars, endless upgrades, lifestyle inflation disguised as success. They made a fortune and spent too. Income without discipline is just fuel for stupidity. Now let's talk about time, because this is where everything accelerates or collapses. Time is the most underappreciated asset young people have, and the most painful thing older people wish they could buy back. Compounding only works when you give it enough runway. People think compounding is some abstract mathematical concept. It isn't. It's simply growth on growth, returns stacking on previous returns, small amounts becoming meaningful through repetition. Start early and modest contributions become powerful. Start late and even large contributions struggle to catch up. Every year you delay is a year of compounding. You never recover. But here's the problem. Young people feel rich in time and poor in money. Older people feel rich in money and poor in time. So young people postpone investing, telling themselves they'll start later when they earn more. Later rarely comes. Habits solidify. Expenses expand. Responsibilities multiply. The ideal moment is always now. Even small amounts matter if they're consistent. And consistency is more important than optimization. People waste years trying to find the perfect investment while ignoring the obvious one, themselves, their savings rate, their discipline, their behavior. You don't need perfect timing. You need time in the market. Markets will crash. They always do. That isn't a flaw. That's the mechanism. Panic creates opportunity. Every major downturn transfers wealth from the impatient to the patient, from the emotional to the rational. Most people panic sell. They flee when prices drop. They wait until things feel safe again and buy back in higher. They repeat this cycle and call it bad luck. It isn't bad luck. It's bad temperament. If you understand what you own, volatility becomes noise. If you don't understand what you own, every headline feels like danger. Real risk is not price fluctuation. Real risk is ignorance, which brings us to learning. Most people stop learning once they leave school. They assume education is something that happens early in life and then ends. That's a catastrophic misunderstanding. Formal schooling should teach you how to think. After that, self-education becomes your responsibility. You want financial independence? Study businesses. Learn how cash flows work. Understand basic accounting. Read annual reports. Learn how incentives shape behavior. Learn economic history. Learn why bubbles form and why they burst. None of this is mysterious. The same patterns repeat again and again. Human nature doesn't change. Fear and greed oscillate. Markets overreact. People chase performance. Then they regret it. Knowledge compounds just like money. The more you learn, the easier it becomes to learn more. The clearer patterns become, the fewer mistakes you make. But this requires effort. Real effort. Not scrolling, not watching motivational clips, reading, thinking, reflecting, and it requires humility. You must accept that you don't know much. Overconfidence is expensive. Another concept that saves enormous amounts of money is inversion. Instead of asking how to succeed, ask how to fail. Then avoid those behaviors. Guaranteed ways to stay poor. Spend everything you earn. Use debt for consumption. Avoid investing. Chase quick wins. Follow crowds. Ignore financial education. Blame circumstances. Seek comfort over progress. Do the opposite consistently and wealth becomes highly probable. Not fast. Not flashy. Probable. People hate that answer because it lacks drama. They want secrets. They want hacks. They want shortcuts. There aren't any. There is only behavior multiplied by time. Now let's address something emotionally difficult. Saying no. Most people think success comes from saying yes to opportunities. In reality, success comes from saying no to nearly everything so you can say yes to the few things that matter. Every dollar spent on nonsense is a dollar that can't compound. Every unnecessary obligation is time stolen from progress. Every distraction delays momentum. You must become selective, ruthlessly selective, with money, with commitments, with attention. You don't need dozens of investments. You need a few good ones held for a long time. You don't need constant activity. You need occasional decisive action. Waiting is part of the strategy. Doing nothing is often the correct move. This makes people uncomfortable. They feel unproductive. They want to trade, adjust, optimize. But constant motion doesn't equal progress. Sometimes it just increases fees and taxes. The best investors wait patiently and act aggressively when the odds are clearly in their favor. Temperament again, not intelligence, temperament. Smart people often struggle because they overthink. They build elaborate theories. They rationalize poor decisions. They assume complexity equals sophistication. Meanwhile, disciplined people quietly outperform them by sticking to simple principles. Beyond a basic threshold, intelligence stops helping and starts hurting. What matters is emotional control. Can you stay calm when markets fall? Can you resist envy when others flaunt spending? Can you delay gratification when temptation is everywhere? Can you hold quality assets while everyone around you panics? These skills determine outcomes far more than spreadsheets. Let me also say this: you must have skin in the game. You learn differently when your own money is involved. Paper trading teaches nothing. Advice without exposure is meaningless. You must feel losses. You must experience volatility. You must make mistakes with real money to develop judgment. Those experiences create scar tissue. They teach restraint. They teach patience. They teach respect for risk. Start small if you must, but start, make decisions, learn from them, adjust, repeat. This is how competence is built, not through theory alone, through practice combined with reflection. Most people never do this. They outsource responsibility. They follow tips. They copy trades. Then they blame others when things go wrong. That guarantees mediocrity. Financial independence requires ownership of decisions. You must become the steward of your own capital. No one cares more about your future than you do. And once you accept that, once you stop waiting for permission or perfect conditions, progress accelerates. You realize wealth isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build, quietly, relentlessly, over time. And that's the point most people never reach. Let's go deeper, because there's another layer most people never examine: identity. People don't fail financially because they lack tactics. They fail because they never change how they see themselves. You will never outperform your self-image for long. If deep down you believe money is scarce, that wealth is for other people, that you're bad with finances, your behavior will always drift back to confirm that belief. You can read every book, watch every video, follow every strategy, but if your identity remains that of a spender instead of an owner, nothing sticks. Behavior follows belief, always. Most people secretly identify as consumers. Their default mode is buying, upgrading, replacing, indulging. They feel productive when they purchase. They feel rewarded when they spend. Saving feels restrictive. Investing feels risky. Ownership feels abstract. So they keep doing what feels good and wonder why they never get ahead. Wealthy people flip that wiring. They get satisfaction from watching assets grow. They feel pride in restraint. They enjoy progress more than purchases. They don't see saving as sacrifice. They see it as buying freedom. That mental shift is everything. Once you internalize that every dollar is a worker that can either labor for you or disappear forever, your decisions change. You stop asking what you can afford. You start asking what this money could become if left alone. That's when momentum begins. Another truth people avoid: your environment shapes your financial future more than your intentions. If you surround yourself with people who spend impulsively, complain constantly, and mock discipline, you will absorb that behavior no matter how strong you think you are. Humans are social creatures. We mirror norms. If everyone around you upgrades cars every few years, you'll feel pressure to do the same. If your friends treat debt casually, you'll rationalize it. If your circle celebrates consumption, you'll equate spending with success. This is why selecting your environment matters. You don't need wealthy friends. You need rational ones. People who respect delayed gratification. People who talk about ideas instead of purchases. People who value progress over appearances. And if you don't have that circle yet, You create it through books and learning. You borrow mindset from those who've walked the path before you. Isolation from stupidity is a form of wealth. Now let's talk about opportunity, because people misunderstand this too. They think opportunity looks obvious. It doesn't. Real opportunity usually feels uncomfortable. It appears during uncertainty. It shows up when headlines are frightening and crowds are running away. Comfortable opportunities are usually overpriced. When things feel safe, assets are expensive. When things feel dangerous, assets are cheap. Most people do the opposite of what logic demands. They buy when prices are high and sell when prices are low. They chase performance. They flee volatility. They confuse motion with insight. If you want a long-term advantage, train yourself to move toward discomfort, not away from it. When quality assets go on sale because everyone is panicking, that's when you lean in. This requires preparation. You don't make good decisions in chaos unless you've already done the thinking in calm moments. You must know what you own and why you own it before fear enters the room. That preparation is what allows you to act rationally when others can't. People ask how to find great investments. That's the wrong question. The better question is how to become the kind of person who recognizes value when it appears. That requires study. It requires patience. It requires standards. Most opportunities should be rejected. You don't need many winners. A handful of well-chosen decisions held for long periods can define an entire lifetime. But people get bored. They want action. They feel compelled to trade, tweak, optimize. This urge destroys returns. Activity feels productive, but it often just increases friction. Taxes, fees, mistakes. The best strategy is often to buy good assets and leave them alone. This feels too simple for most people to accept. Now let's address something that quietly sabotages wealth: envy. Envy makes people spend money they shouldn't. It makes them chase lifestyles they can't sustain. It pushes them into bad decisions just to keep up appearances. Social comparison is financial poison. Someone will always have more. Someone will always upgrade faster. Someone will always travel better. If you allow external benchmarks to dictate your behavior, you'll never feel satisfied, and you'll never accumulate meaningful wealth. Comparison erodes discipline. Contentment protects it. This doesn't mean lowering ambition. It means raising standards internally instead of externally. Measure progress against your past self, not against someone else's highlight reel. Another destructive emotion is pride. Pride prevents people from admitting mistakes. They hold losing investments too long because selling feels like failure. They defend bad decisions because their ego is attached. They refuse to ask questions because they don't want to look ignorant. Markets don't care about your pride. They extract tuition mercilessly. The fastest learners are those who admit error quickly and adjust. The slowest are those who argue with reality. Now let me say something important about goals. Most people set vague goals. I want to be rich. That's meaningless. You need clarity. How much income do you want from your assets? By when? What does financial independence actually look like to you? Without clear targets, you drift. Wealth is built deliberately, not accidentally. That doesn't mean rigid timelines. It means direction. You create systems that move you closer year after year, regardless of market conditions. Automated investing, controlled spending, continuous learning, regular review. Systems beat motivation. Motivation fades. Systems persist. People wait to feel inspired. That's backwards. Action creates motivation. You invest first, then confidence grows. You save first, then discipline strengthens. You learn first, then clarity emerges. Waiting for perfect conditions guarantees stagnation. Start imperfectly. Adjust along the way. Another point people misunderstand is diversification. They hear the word and assume it means owning a little of everything. That's lazy thinking. Diversification is protection against ignorance. If you truly understand something, concentration makes sense. If you don't, diversification limits damage. Most people diversify poorly. They spread money across things they don't understand and call it safety. Real safety comes from competence. If you don't know how something works, you shouldn't own much of it. And if you do understand something deeply, you don't need dozens of positions. Quality over quantity. Understanding over speculation. Let me also address the myth of overnight success. It doesn't exist. Every financial success story is decades of quiet discipline compressed into a headline. People see the result and assume luck. They don't see the years of restraint, the studying, the patience, the missed parties, the boring consistency. Wealth compounds invisibly for a long time before it becomes visible. Most people quit during that invisible phase. They don't see progress fast enough, so they abandon the process. That's why few succeed. Persistence through monotony separates winners from everyone else. Finally, understand this. Financial independence isn't about buying things. It's about buying your time. It's about reducing dependency. It's about creating options. It's waking up knowing you don't have to tolerate nonsense. It's choosing how you spend your days. That freedom is built one disciplined decision at a time, not through brilliance, through consistency, through restraint, through ownership, and through refusing to live the same way most people do. Let me keep going, because this is where things become practical in ways most people never implement. There's a massive difference between understanding ideas and living them. Plenty of people agree with everything I've said so far. They nod along, they feel motivated, then they go right back to the same habits. Information alone doesn't change outcomes. Repetition does. Wealth is not built in moments of inspiration. It's built in boring routines carried out over years. Automatic transfers into investment accounts, regular reviews of spending, saying no to upgrades that don't matter, choosing progress over comfort again and again. That's the real work. People underestimate how powerful automation is. If you rely on willpower, you will eventually fail. Willpower is a limited resource. Systems are not. You set things up once and they operate quietly in the background. Money moves into investments before you see it. Bills are paid on schedule. Savings accumulate without debate. This removes emotion from the process. Emotion is expensive. Design your financial life so good behavior happens by default. Now let's talk about mistakes, because everyone makes them. You will buy things you shouldn't. You will invest in something that disappoints. You will miss opportunities. That's part of the journey. The difference between people who build wealth and those who don't is how they respond to mistakes. Poor responses look like denial, blame, or paralysis. Productive responses look like analysis, adjustment, and forward motion. Every mistake carries information. If you're paying attention, losses teach you more than wins. They reveal gaps in understanding, they expose emotional weaknesses, they force humility, used properly. Mistakes become tuition, but most people refuse to learn. They repeat the same behaviors and expect different results. They jump from strategy to strategy, chasing novelty instead of mastery. You don't need new tactics every year. You need better execution of timeless principles. Another thing people misunderstand is risk. They think risk is volatility. It isn't. Volatility is visible. Real risk is permanent loss of capital. Real risk comes from leverage you can't service, businesses you don't understand, and behavior you can't control. A fluctuating portfolio of high-quality assets isn't risky if you have time and discipline. A stable-looking situation built on debt and fragile income streams is extremely risky. Risk hides in comfort. People take enormous risks in familiar forms and avoid small risks in unfamiliar ones. They feel safe holding depreciating cash while inflation eats purchasing power. They feel afraid owning productive assets that fluctuate short-term but grow long-term. This backward perception destroys wealth. Now let me say something about simplicity. Complexity sells, simplicity works. The more complicated your financial life becomes, the harder it is to manage. Multiple accounts, obscure investments, excessive diversification, complicated strategies, this creates friction and confusion. The best systems are simple enough to stick with during stress. You don't need exotic vehicles. You need ownership in productive enterprises. You don't need constant adjustments. You need consistency. People love to complicate what doesn't need to be complicated. Another major factor is lifestyle design. Many people pursue income without considering how much they actually need. They chase higher salaries while allowing expenses to rise in parallel. This keeps them trapped regardless of income level. Instead, define a lifestyle that satisfies you and build assets to support it. Freedom comes from lowering required income while raising passive income, not the other way around. If your expenses grow faster than your investments, you're running in place. And let's address something uncomfortable: entitlement. Modern culture encourages people to believe they deserve things without earning them. Comfort, luxury, experiences. This mindset is poison to financial progress. You don't deserve outcomes. You earn them. Wealth is not a right. It's a reward for disciplined behavior applied over time. People who feel entitled to consumption will never accumulate capital. They treat money as something to enjoy, not something to deploy. That distinction determines everything. Now, let's talk about focus. People scatter their attention across dozens of goals. A little investing here, a side business there, a speculative trade, a new idea every month. Nothing compounds because nothing receives sustained effort. Progress requires concentration. Pick a few strategies that align with your temperament and execute relentlessly. Half-hearted attempts at many things produce nothing. Full commitment to a few things produces results. This applies to learning as well. Don't skim everything. Study deeply. Learn one subject thoroughly before moving to the next. Financial statements, business models, economic cycles, behavioral psychology. Depth beats breadth. Here's another truth. You cannot outsource responsibility for your financial future. Advisors can help, tools can assist, but you must understand what's happening with your money. Blind trust guarantees disappointment. If you don't know why you own something, you don't own it. It owns you. You must develop judgment. That only comes from study and experience. People want certainty. Investing doesn't offer it. It offers probability. You make the best decision you can with available information, accept uncertainty, and move forward. Waiting for perfect clarity means waiting forever. Action under uncertainty is unavoidable. That's adulthood. Let me also emphasize patience again, because people underestimate how rare it is. Patience allows you to hold quality assets while others churn. Patience allows you to wait for good opportunities instead of forcing bad ones. Patience allows compounding to work. Impatience destroys portfolios. People sell too early. They abandon strategies too soon. They chase trends instead of staying the course. They expect results in months instead of decades. Wealth doesn't reward urgency. It rewards endurance. And endurance is built through habits. Finally, understand that financial independence is not a destination. It's a byproduct of correct behavior, repeated long enough. There's no finish line where discipline stops mattering. You continue managing risk. You continue learning. You continue making thoughtful decisions. Money is dynamic. Markets evolve. Your life changes. The principles remain. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference in productive assets. Avoid unnecessary debt. Keep learning. Control emotions. Be patient. That's the entire playbook. Everything else is noise. Most people will ignore this because it lacks excitement. They'll keep chasing shortcuts and blaming circumstances. A small minority will quietly apply these ideas year after year. Those people will wake up one day with freedom, not because they were special, because they were consistent. Let me bring this home, because at some point you stop talking about concepts and start talking about life. Money is not the goal. Money is the tool. What you're really building is autonomy, the ability to choose, the power to walk away, the freedom to spend your days on things that matter instead of obligations you tolerate. Most people never experience this. They live paycheck to paycheck, promotion to promotion, hoping the next raise will finally make them feel secure. It never does. Security doesn't come from income. It comes from ownership. You don't become free by earning more. You become free by needing less and owning more. That distinction changes everything. People chase income because it feels active. They ignore ownership because it feels slow. But income stops when you stop working. Ownership keeps producing. That's the whole game. And yet most people refuse to play it seriously. They dabble, they invest sporadically, they save inconsistently, they talk about goals without building systems, then they wonder why nothing changes. Consistency beats intensity every time. You don't need heroic effort. You need boring repetition. Now let's address fear, because fear quietly dictates more financial decisions than any spreadsheet ever will. Fear of missing out pushes people into bubbles. Fear of loss pushes them out of markets at the worst possible moments. Fear of being different keeps them trapped in average behavior. Fear feels logical in the moment. It rarely is. The antidote to fear is understanding. When you know what you own and why you own it, volatility becomes background noise. When you understand how compounding works, patience becomes easier. When you understand that downturns are temporary but ownership is permanent, panic loses its grip. People who panic simply don't understand what they're doing. Education is emotional armor. Another emotional trap is greed. Greed makes people overreach. They borrow too much. They speculate instead of invest. They chase returns instead of building foundations. They forget that wealth is accumulated by protecting capital first and growing it second. You don't get rich by swinging for fences. You get rich by avoiding strikeouts. Preservation matters. Then there's pride. Pride keeps people from admitting they were wrong. It keeps them in bad investments. It prevents learning. Pride is expensive. The most successful people I've known are willing to say 3 words without hesitation. I was wrong. That flexibility saves fortunes. Let me also talk about lifestyle again, because this is where everything either accelerates or collapses. If your expenses rise, every time your income rises, you're trapped. No matter how much you make, you'll always feel pressure. But if you lock in modest living costs and let income increases flow directly into investments, your progress becomes exponential. That's the fork in the road. Most people choose comfort. A few choose freedom, and freedom compounds. Another point people overlook is energy. Wealth building isn't just financial. It's physical and mental. If you're exhausted, distracted, unhealthy, or constantly stressed, you'll make poor decisions. You'll seek convenience. You'll avoid discomfort. You'll fall back on habits that feel good short-term and cost you long-term. Your health is an asset. Protect it. Your focus is an asset. Guard it. Your time is an asset. Spend it intentionally. Everything compounds, including neglect. Now, let me address a common excuse. Starting small. People think small beginnings don't matter. They do. Small actions establish identity. They build momentum. They create feedback loops. Saving your first 100 matters. Investing your first 1,000 matters. Not because of the amount, but because of what it represents. It signals that you've shifted from consumer to owner, from spectator to participant. Momentum starts with action. And once you start, the process teaches you you'll make mistakes. Good. That's part of it. Just make sure your mistakes are survivable. Don't bet everything on one idea. Don't use leverage you can't handle. Don't chase hype. Stay in the game. Survival precedes success. People who blow up never recover because they're no longer playing. Another critical idea. Focus on what you can control. You can't control markets. You can't control interest rates. You can't control economic cycles. You can control savings rate. You can control spending. You can control education. You can control asset allocation. You can control behavior. Spend your energy there. Worrying about things outside your control wastes attention and produces anxiety. Progress lives inside your choices. Let me also say something about generosity, because wealth without character is empty. Money amplifies who you already are. If you're selfish, you become more selfish. If you're generous, you gain the capacity to help more. Financial independence gives you the ability to contribute without pressure. The support causes you care about, to help family, to create value beyond yourself. That's the real payoff. Now here's the hard truth. Most people will not do what's required. They'll agree with everything, then change nothing. They'll say they understand, then continue spending impulsively. They'll promise to start tomorrow, next month, next year. Tomorrow becomes never, and life passes quietly while they're waiting. The principles are simple. The execution is rare. If you want different results, you must accept different behaviors. You must be willing to look strange in a consumer culture. You must delay gratification while others indulge. You must prioritize ownership while others prioritize appearance. You must become comfortable being misunderstood. That's the price of independence. Let me leave you with this. Wealth is built from thousands of small, unremarkable decisions made correctly. Choosing to invest instead of spend, choosing to learn instead of scroll, choosing patience over impulse, choosing discipline over comfort. No single decision makes you rich, but every decision moves you closer or farther away. And over decades, that distance becomes enormous. So start where you are. Use what you have. Begin today. Build systems. Stay consistent. Keep learning. Protect your capital. Let compounding work. You don't need perfection. You need persistence. Do that long enough, and one day you'll look back and realize the hardest part wasn't the math. It was having the discipline to be different. That's all there is. The rest is up to you.